I would like to start with questions to Ben, because you deal with a lot of traditional investors and Web3 investors. And could you tell us a little bit more about the distinction, how the traditional investors better understand and capitalize on the emerging Web3 ecosystem? How can they do that? How would you help them to get there? What advice would you give them for them? If we have any potential investors that people don't know where to put their money, Ben is the person to talk to.
General advice only.
General advice, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, look, it's interesting with market cycles that we're going through at the moment. People get overwhelmed and forget that I think the investment into the digital economy is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Too many people look at massive returns and move too quick with emotion and don't plan properly what they're doing. And that planning, I think, comes from a number of different perspectives. Education is the start, and understanding where you're at an education level, and then adjusting your portfolio, your direction of how you're going to attack the market based on where you're at, not where you think you should be at, right? And so that involves getting the right people around you and using the right tools and systems. And I think one of the things with particularly the marketplace and how it's set up at the moment, there's a lot of order books and people traditionally aren't familiar with that, understanding how a buy and sell order book works and market makers and getting squeezed and spreads and these sorts of terms. And I think investors can get lost really quickly in that. So I suppose that the key message is understand where you're at in terms of education, attack the market in a way that is suitable for you. This is a nascent market. It is high risk. It should not have all of your capital in it. So don't just get carried away and think, oh, I can double my money here, and therefore I'm just going to go all in. Like, there is so many unusual risks to this sector that you don't see in traditional markets. Smart contract risk, counterparty risk. These are all things that most people really don't get and don't understand when they're investing in something. So I think educating on that front is really key. One of the things, as a bit of a cheat, that I would suggest you, we run investment funds. We're pretty private about how our portfolio is built, but some of the funds are really quite public in terms of doing VC activity, and they do publish a lot of information. Like we publish how we analyse different investments, but that you'll see that there's a lot of large investment funds globally that are really transparent on their portfolios. And that should be a good indicator, because if these guys have done their due diligence and they're leading into something, that should be a really good start. They're looking at network effect, like Yatsu mentioned, because effectively that's what cryptocurrency is all about, these network effects that can generate value down the track. And meme coins are a perfect example of that at the moment, that you've got these large groups of people and don't have any purpose at the moment, but how can they monetize that purpose later on? So they're probably some tips.
Do you see a greater interest from traditional investors after, for example, events like now we have ETF on Bitcoin? We have a greater interest, at least overseas, in regulating that space. It seems to be a more institutionalized space than it was maybe a few years ago. Do you see also a greater interest from investors, institutional investors, in approaching you?
Absolutely. I think there has been that interest for a while. I think a lot of the larger family offices have been investing quietly and testing and understanding and learning in the background. I think they're coming to the fore a little bit more. The problem is retail and sort of that medium-sized investor has really had the door shut in their face for too long. And we'll probably touch on regulation later on, but I think one of the key challenges at the moment is most people buy stocks through brokers, and at the moment when they go to a broker to invest in cryptocurrency, the broker says, I can't work with you. It's not on our approved product list. We don't have insurance for it. Therefore, you're going to have to do that, but I can look after everything else. And so what you've got is investors with a desire to invest that are being left without the professional support, because, to be frank, the regulations aren't clear, and there's a lot of challenges that brokers, financial planners are experiencing. So they're left to go off and fend for themselves. And that's often where these scams come in, and they're doing the wrong thing, losing their private keys. You know, the custody around these assets is really unique. So I think they've been there and they've wanted to do it for a long time. The institutional wave is here. We're a trustee business as well, and we've had numerous approaches over the last month to assist traditional fund managers to onboard in this space and bring their investor base across as well. And you know, with that is massive amounts of capital coming in. We'll say one thing we're really noticing at the moment is traditional fund managers prefer to trade futures. They're still not understanding the spot markets, and futures markets need significant liquidity to operate. And so there's real opportunity to think above this at the moment, and it's one thing one of our funds does is look at the funding rates and how we capitalise on the funding rates of all this capital coming in and providing liquidity into the markets, and how you can get good returns. And to be honest, in a market neutral fund, in these sorts of environments, you can earn 40, 50, 60% per annum without having risk of the underlying investment, and that's one of the unique positions that we see as evolving at the moment.
That sounds good. Much better than probably. That's really good.
Well, so, I should say on that as well. When you get returns like that, as opposed to money being in a bank account, earning 4, 5, 6% at best, that capital is going to want to come across.
Of course.
Right? And same if it's currently invested in the mortgage markets, it'll want to come across. And I think we're going to see a massive wave. Trying to fuel this liquidity, and what happens is that funding rate drops. The more money that comes in the market, the funding rate drops, and it finds its equilibrium. But particularly over the next 12 months, I believe, maybe a little bit longer, I think that market neutral trade and providing the liquidity for the ecosystem is a really exciting investment opportunity.
And hopefully by that time we're going to have clear regulations so that the mum and dads in the room can ask you.
I doubt it. I doubt
you
it.
Doubt it.
I think regulation clarity is still
still away.
Yeah.
Now let's move to the more exciting space within the digital assets, the metaverse, is the gaming. How do you see that space evolving? Where are we in that curve of technological evolution in metaverse gaming? What kind of market is that? Do you deal with that kind of market? Yes, to you.
I feel like I'm it's sleeping at the moment, the metaverse space. There's been a sort of small interest, but I think markets typically run in cycles. And 2017 we had an ICO market pump. We've had DeFi summer, which was the decentralised finance markets. We've had NFTs, and I think this cycle is around meme coins and that network effect, AI. And potentially some layer 2 stuff. And I think the metaverse, from an investor's perspective, is getting a little bit left behind. That often suggests that potentially there's some good opportunities around the corner, and now might be a good time to look at this sector, and where you can pick up some cheap opportunities. If you're looking at the sector, you should be looking at how often are they doing GitHub commits? How many followers they have, how many players they have, do they have utility in their token or in their gaming universe, and that broad network effect again. These are the and what sort of backers they've got. If they've got some big, A16Z backers that are global VC funds, they're likely to keep pushing Animoca as well, keep funding these projects to get them to where they need to be, and there could be some really good diamonds in the rough at the moment to look at.
I would like to thank you. We have probably a couple of those projects around, like we mentioned, Animoca Brands, Sandbox, and Decentraland. Yep. They seem to be still there. They're not gone, but that's true. There was not much noise about them in the space, so maybe that's a good time to pick something. Possibly, but it's not an advice. I'd like to move it to Andy, because we would like to know a little bit more about the challenges that we have in building the infrastructure for the metaverse and for gaming using blockchain. And since you are a builder and you've built your Hela blockchain, would you like to tell us a bit more about the challenges of building scalable solutions for gaming and Web3, which require a lot of speed and scalability, and how is Hela blockchain dealing with that?
So indeed, right? When it comes to building a metaverse on chain, it's a totally different animal because providing a good user experience on a virtual environment, it's challenging without blockchain. And when you need to translate that to blockchain to deliver the user experience, it's indeed a challenge because I think one thing that we work with actually a number of metaverse builder to build something on chain. So the thing is that the teams we work with, most of them they do not have the direct blockchain experience. So one thing that we found that was important to establish with them is to set the expectation of what can be on chain and what should not be on chain and what they really want to be on chain. And then I think largely in terms of like game assets, like in-game assets being on chain to be generated as a form of NFT, and then that's one thing that can be done without degrading the performance. And then I think and on that, right, something that's more, I think we are more excited to, or we are pretty excited to work on now is working in some of the metaverse projects that is building with us to build like a AI personality within the metaverse. So they can be behave like a NPC, a non-brain character, or they can be part of the AI to do like a procedural story generation. So basically the environment or the storyline of the game or the metaverse evolve by AI, so those part, right? Those AI has already, they're already being built. However, there's one problem that a lot of AI developers or content generator often struggle with, which is that particular model that it's or those models that's been built, like the content generator or the owner of the metaverse, right? When they are designing or getting the AI out, they often worry that if I were to commission a team or a developer to build that AI, that same model or that same, so imagine you build an avatar who it's who you spend a lot of effort to train, and then it becomes so smart, and then the developer or someone could just clone it and then put it in their own metaverse. So without paying any royalties or even crediting the IP. So I think one thing that we are working on is using blockchain to secure these models, so that the access to the models, although the models are largely have to be stored off chain, because I think at this juncture there's no blockchain that's able to have an entire AI trained model being fully on chain. That trained model has to be off chain, but the access to the model should be via like a private key or NFT that allow the access to that model to a certain server or where they can get access to that model. So I think these are some ways that I think we are contributing in the more innovative usage of blockchain when it comes to metaverse, particularly on the AI part of things. And then there are other things that we're working on where like just I mentioned, like for example, in-game asset, in-game currency. So a lot of games or gaming related platform, they are actually running on points at the moment. So and they do have a desire to put the points as a token on chain, so that it can be more it can be transferable. Yeah, for example, a platform or a developer, a game studio can be building multiple games. So if their currency can be transferable between the games, if it's something that is pretty interesting. So I think those are the the things that we've been working on, and it and yeah. So
I like that how you actually pointed out that not everything has to be on blockchain. That the kind of the integration of Web 2 and Web 3 or kind of coexistence. Like for example, we show the studio, the gallery. That's a Web 2 gallery. It's not on blockchain itself, but the digital assets are. So the gallery is just a holder, and that allows you for a better scalability. And that's perhaps what you can do with games, right? As you mentioned, so some of the elements, the heavier parts of the compute can be in Web 2.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like back in 2017, 2018, the ICO time. At that point in time, Metaverse, like Ben said, right, Metaverse wasn't a big narrative at that point in time, but everyone was trying to get everything on chain, where after working on blockchain for a while, you realize that not everything can be on chain. You got to be realistic on what to build, but key thing, I think key thing for developers is really to find the right problems to work on. Because I've seen many projects and developers, they actually kind of maybe work on the wrong problems. Like they try to solve something, but this particular module or feature didn't need to be on chain actually.
Exactly, it's not a problem.
It's not a problem.
Yeah. And they're wasting their resources because of the pressure they have. So everything has to be a blockchain. And,
yes.
and it's also great that you touch on the AI, that it doesn't have to obviously be running on blockchain, but blockchain could help secure it and make it more decentralized.
That's right. So
right.
and also it could help to create that trustless environment where the creator and the developers, they could share, they could co-build their models without the creator worrying about losing their IP. Yeah. That's actually a real problem that is in many industries where the creator, they often have a thought at the back of mind, like, if I were to work with this AI developer, and then what's going to stop him from taking over or stealing my models?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have a solution to that.
Yes, we're working on this. We have a solution on that, and then we are implementing that solution. We are working with already some Metaverse project on the AI part of things, to put their AI models, access to their AI models to be secure on chain. Yeah. So basically,
Go on.
Yeah, basically it's like a DID that allows them and only them the access to those models. So without that private key going through, right, the models will remain encrypted in the server, and then even if someone clones it, it's going to be a hell of a task to try to decrypt it and use it. Yeah.
Okay. So that solves a lot of problems, and also in terms of ownership, right, of the data that we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
So that you can protect the ownership of data, the big large language models.
Yeah.
That are used for training. Could you probably secure it in a better way, so that the people who provide the data to the large language model have some, perhaps, can they monetize it?
Yeah, so they can definitely monetize it, and at the moment they can't. It's hard because if and it is some of the real cases that we're working on. So imagine if company A, he builds a whole suite of or rather company A, he built and this is real story. So he built like a game with very, very nice and fancy AI. The game itself didn't do well, but it's not fun. So but the AI is actually useful. So the AI that he built, right, is actually useful. So people actually wants to buy his NPC character, but it's going to be difficult for him to resell, because he may sell it once, right, and then that he lose the the access to that model, and then that model could be then sold to somebody else. Yeah. So we are working with him to secure the access to that model, so that he can actually sell it to a few companies, and then I think that will be a new way to monetize game assets or game AI assets. Yeah. Where this is a part that have never been monetized before. So I think it's a completely new space actually that we're working on.
It's great because you're stumbling, you're coming across problems, real problems,
Yeah.
and that's how you can then provide better solutions instead of having the mindset that, well, everything has to be on blockchain, right? And let's approach it from that sense. We'll have Andy talking more about his blockchain also in the second session. I would like to move now to Jarek, who looks at that space from yet another different perspective. So it's not money only and not a technology, but what impact it has on people, especially on the young ones. As you've heard, Australia is leading the space on young people having access to social media. Now the limit is 16 years old, and that may become a global norm. And for that reason, I would like to ask Jarek, on what potential benefits and risks do you see in engaging young people with Web3, not the typical social media, and the kind of immersive virtual reality and environments that is different to Web2?
I mean, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm sort of learning so much here, and I don't consider myself to be any expert on Web3. In healthcare, I'm still learning, and all the information here is extremely helpful. I mean, it's kind of quite fascinating to see the public debate about social media. And it's also quite reflective, it's quite reflective on the political, legislative process of how slowly legislation is catching up with very fastly moving technologies. I mean, in some way, social media is almost obsolete if the technology is moving so fast, and in many ways, the Metaverse, Web3, immersive technologies, and technology, hardware technology coming with it, well, in some way, maybe surpassing smartphones very soon, and we'll be using completely different mediums. And so general public is a bit lost in keeping up with those technologies and developments. But young people are natives in that space. They're picking up on those changes much more quickly. 8, 10 years old, getting into already Web3 games and yes, enjoying it. But ultimately, those tools are very powerful and very immersive, very seductive. The photorealism, the ubiquity, the interoperability, scalability is well, breathtaking in many ways. As a late baby boomer, I'm kind of feeling in this space more like a baby than a boomer, because it's just so exhilarating, and that's what young people are responding to. And so the sooner there is public education and information to parents, educators about the Web3 and a bit of separation of what that sort of standard bit of a cliche gaming is and versus what Web3 gaming is. Well, I think that probably would protect or guide the upcoming generations in appropriate use of those tools. Ultimately, we know about Web3, and we know about the benefits of it, about privacy, security, self-sovereign identity protection, that sort of element of decentralization, which does give the users some degree of protection, the governance of the decentralized autonomous organizations. I mean, that's something which potentially could replace social media. The rules of those of communication through those platforms and DAOs could potentially be much more protective to the wild west of the current centralized databases driven by commercial interests and with very little governance, even on the government levels. So, and I think even the public debate about social media recently kind of bit of miss the point that there are some technologies. There is quite a sophisticated, there are very sophisticated AI protocols which potentially could be applied to already existing tools. With those AI tools are already quite integral part of Web3 developments, which effectively will be much more secure, much more private, much more respectful to the young users. There's also a problem with the word gaming, because I mean, language is important. Language carries a lot of emotions, a lot of stereotypes, a lot of misunderstandings. I mean, whenever child psychiatrists talk about gaming, they always talk about pathology, whilst actually gaming is learning. It's an interactive learning. It's a very powerful learning. That's a playground where all of us learn all the time new skills. And but the problem starts when we actually don't separate the screen times, the amount of time someone is gaming versus what actually they're doing online. With Web3, with immersive realities, there are some additional elements which that screen-based gaming doesn't have, like, for example, have a bit more behavioral activation. Playing with smartphones, with screens, a lot of Web3 games, it's very sedentary, very sort of isolating. With immersive realities, you're bringing that immersive, interactive component to it. There's also this immersive environment increases that users' agency. It's more based on creation, interaction, rather than just consuming the passive content.
Can I maybe touch on that? So, because you're also designing that space for a metaverse, for a kind of a doctor-patient interaction. But for young people, I was just wondering, you're not a noob as you presented yourself. You have good understanding of that space, and you're building that space. So I'm just kind of, as a psychiatrist, but also builder in that space, how can we design these metaverse experiences to promote positive mental health and the kind of desirable outcomes?
Well, I think in the current technology, legislative, regulatory framework, I don't think that if metaverse will be used for clinical purposes as such, sitting down and running psychotherapy with someone. I think it is a bit of a risky stage because there's not enough data protection. Ultimately, in immersive realities, the information which we have access to is much, much broader than what we have on smartphones. There's behavioral information, there's biometrics, very powerful, very useful tools. I mean, we're playing with few of those tools like voice recognition, emotional recognition, and even sort of collecting vitals like heart rate, blood pressure, HRV, which is an important indicator of a stress level. All this could be done through pictures, through videos, through selfies. And all this information, that so-called Internet of Things, well, it's a really added element to immersive reality, immersive environments, which are potentially very helpful, but they need to be safeguarded in the right way.
Because that's very valuable information, right? It's
Absolutely.
the data that usually at this stage, usually big tech companies own. Mm-hmm. So can we own that in Web3 and make sure that we control that information?
Well, that's the critical part of how that data is secured and who owns that security. And I think that's going back to young people. We kind of need to really educate them to actually how to reclaim their privacy, how to reclaim their security, and online, how to actually own their identity. Young people, well, may not be aware of some of the exploitation which in some way going on behind the scenes, and how the information which they so willingly and innocently sharing online, how it could be distorted and misused. So I think, and particularly if it comes to very young people,
Right.
those who are starting playing Roblox or Minecraft, innocent games which ultimately collecting a lot of information. So, but going back to the point of metaverse and help, I think we are experimenting. We are playing with ideas, and more in a lifestyle and wellness way. So it's almost like semi-clinical, subclinical type of interventions, which is actually very, very needed. I think we have this either nothing or someone is going to exit the emergency department. Well, that's a really bad mental health. The most important is to actually that guidance, that support, and that could be done, secure with appropriately run metaverse, and we have some international examples. We're looking at that. There's a group in Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, very dynamic, using immersive reality with phenomenal AI NCPs, non-players characters, which are part of the very sort of appropriate environment. Some form of anxieties, phobias, creating specific environments, the exposure therapy, social learning, social emotional learning for neurodiverse kids. It's done in that space, and it's done very well. But the key here is how to guide users from reality to immersive reality and back to reality. And I think that's where research is really a bit scatty. And I would like to mention the group at Curtin University, Occupational Therapy Department, Professor Sonja Gödler and her group. They're looking at that space. They're working together of how actually more closely research this process of extrapolating immersive reality experience into reality, particularly with those kids who obviously can get stuck in immersive reality and live there.
That's a form of addiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's but just to touch on the point of making sure that the data is yours and it's private, Andy, can we secure that from your technological? That's something that could be done, right?
Yeah. So that's something that can be done, and in fact, it's something that we are doing with some government agencies to allow them to share their data privately. So using GK to set out like a channel so that they could share, authenticate the data privately, but at the same time, each party is actually hosting their own data. Yeah.
So that potentially could answer some of the challenges. Now, I know that, gentlemen, you are all fathers, me too, right? So would you feel safer having your kids play in Web3 Metaverse versus the traditional gaming space, Web2?
So maybe I can start first. So there's no moderation in Web3. Yeah, because in normal like game companies, when for them to upload the game onto App Store in every country or anywhere, right? They need to follow. They need to be approved by the country's regulations. And every country has a different standard. Australia just raised the bar recently. So, but in Web3, there's no such thing because everything's on the internet, and then they don't follow any countries. Most of them they don't follow any country's restriction. It's a concern actually. Actually, on that, in the ideal way, I think countries could actually try to block IP address of the sites where the content may not be appropriate for children of a certain age, and then I think there are also blockchain solutions to that, forcing each citizens to get access to Web3 platforms with specific DIDs. Yeah, where DID has to be backed by real credentials.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I hear that the solutions already exist to those problems. And it is perhaps a greater requirement, what I hear across the panel, that we definitely need more education on both ends, the users, investors, but also the government, and better regulations. Because from the technological point of view, we can solve a lot of those problems, but if we don't have a clear regulatory framework, then we don't really know where to go. That's the message we would like to send to our local government and in Australia, to take this Web3 space as a serious industry, because if you look at the numbers, it is a serious industry, creating new jobs. It's a multi-trillion-dollar investment opportunity, attracting capital, attracting new economic development. But we obviously struggle with some of the issues here that we've heard. And regulations are one of them. Do you have any suggestions how to move further and faster in that space to recognize, for the government, to recognize that as a valuable economic sector?
I'm happy to answer that. I think we're very fortunate right now to potentially be witnessing what's happening in the United States with breaking down red tape and barriers. Obviously, there's a signal that that may occur and occur in a big way. It'll be interesting to see whether Australia follows. Just today, ASIC has released a new consultation paper around digital assets, which is updating their info paper 225. This has actually come about, and to give you an idea of the background about regulation from a digital assets perspective, it's come about off the back of, in October of last year, 2023, Treasury came out with a paper asking for the industry to consult into how we should regulate this, and they put a framework together, and the industry responded on that. What's come out since is that Treasury have an opinion and ASIC have a different opinion. Now you've got Treasury, who are the legislators writing the law, and you've got ASIC, who are the enforcers. And so ASIC have disagreed with Treasury behind the scenes, and they've come out and put this consultation paper out to put their views firmly in the public view and to almost regulate prior to the legislation coming out. So they're trying to, there's the internal battles going on. Now what that's doing, it's providing further uncertainty, and that clarity is not there. I think from a WA perspective, you can probably have a look at the UAE as well. I mean, these guys are phenomenally rich off resources and have many more years of resources that they can continue to become wealthy from. But they've already recognised that the future is actually in the digital economy. And they've been very aggressive to put legislation in and make a real home for digital asset businesses globally in the UAE, particularly in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And so you're seeing massive businesses flock over there. Obviously there's tax-free issues, and their licences aren't cheap, by the way. They're expensive, and their auditing process is expensive, and they treat their regulatory bodies like businesses, and they're always trying to upsell. But they're actually building the future. So, and I think WA is not dissimilar. We're resource rich. We like taking a risk. We're happy to take a punt on 4 pegs in the ground and see what's there. So we don't mind a bit of risk, but we need to start evolving and thinking about how we can be known for something other than just resources. We've got some of the best universities in the world, producing some of the best talent. How do we harness that and get on, on the global stage pretty quick? It's a really
you're asking great questions. I think we are on a good path. There's a lot of development in the last few years. The government seems to be supportive of diversifying the economy in the digital direction. But the examples you gave from the Middle East are great. They are way ahead of us. Not even the Middle East, but as you know, Singapore. Very strong and clear regulations that sending strong signal to the industry, to the academia, working together and building the new economy. And it seems to be like we have a little bit of a race now. Some of these regulators and jurisdictions are waking up and competing for talent. We don't have enough talent. So we better make sure that we keep the best talent here. We have some of the great developers here in our audience who maybe because of that lack of regulations travel around the world and look for better opportunities elsewhere. How could we maintain that talent here?
I think on that as well, Hong Kong's really interesting.
Hong Kong.
In the last fortnight, they've come out and said no tax on digital assets, and we're talking about gaming. Is gaming a hobby, or is gaming becoming a business?
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry in the making.
There's a lot of people making money off it, and I look at gaming tokens or in-gaming assets. They're actually a sort of a store of value of time. So the more time you put into a game, you get a better reward, right? Which is very similar in a way to what Bitcoin represents, which is Bitcoin is a store of energy, right? And then we're tokenizing effectively energy off the back of that. So when does a gaming in-game asset not become a hobby anymore and become a business? And therefore, when is that asset become taxed? And these are really complex.
Those are very good questions.
Because it's starting to blur the lines
Yeah.
on both sides.
I'm being mindful of the time, and that we're a little bit over time because of earlier delays. Do we have any comments and questions from the audience before we move to our next panel?
This might be a question directed towards Ben, especially with the rise of meme coins and people being able to create liquidity of ideas, concepts, IPs, whatever it might be. What would you advise? I mean, what other aspects or avenues are there for new projects that are looking for, more particularly, I guess, like national or state funding, funding from local investors, and prioritising that over the rest of the
So I think the meme coin phenomenon is really interesting. It's based off the fact, I think, of a number of areas. I spoke about this recently at the Oz DeFi conference. What meme coins are representing is, I think, a frustration, and it's probably a byproduct of COVID to some extent, this loneliness and isolation, and people want to get back into communities, they want to join online communities, and I think there's typically in crypto, there's a sense of a bit of a gambling nature, but also from the retail market, no one really understands a lot about the technology. They look at it and they try and understand it, and when they go, that's a great project, and they invest in it, it doesn't move, doesn't go up in value. You know, there's so many other factors behind the scenes, you know, market makers and the vesting of the contracts and you know, who is holding the tokens, the underlying. I think there's a lot of unknowns there. They're unregulated markets to some extent. And so what you've got is this move away from traditional kind of looking at the asset and trying to work out exactly how you value that. And typically, if you do value it, if it's got technology, it's got a ceiling price, because you can start drawing sort of parallels to real world assets as well. So it's got a ceiling, whereas you come into look at the network effects of meme coins, and there's nothing that you can actually put a value on. So therefore the value potentially can be infinite. And that's why you're seeing, you know, Dogecoin, I think, peaked at 68 billion value recently, which is, you know, it's a massive network, and it's not producing anything but that pump fund. So the second part of your question was all about research, you know, funding and so forth. The Australian government's pretty good with their R&D funding. I think it's 43.5 cents in the dollar for any new tech. You've got to get it approved. Most good accounting firms have an R&D team in them that can support. I work with a business who has that, and we've actually gone one step further, and we were struggling to find the talent in Australia for this particular tech stack we had, and we got approval to find that resources overseas. And this is probably coming back to your point as well. And so we've got a Ukrainian and a Nepalese development team, and we're able to receive R&D rebates from the government based on our spend overseas. That was a process to get through, but you know, we had to go to a number of universities. We even got Senator Bragg to give us a letter and submitted that to say, look, the tech pool that we're wanting to use for that particular tech stack was too thin in Australia, and we couldn't find the right resources. So
it's sad, because we have a great potential, as you mentioned, the top universities here. We could have done more, but I also know from you know, personal perspective and experience, dealing with that space, explaining blockchain, sometimes it has a little bit of a layer of stigma still, and it's not necessarily something that you know, many people at the higher level at the university would like to pay attention as they potentially should. And in a way, we kind of missed the boat of a decade of development in terms of better content, research, and educational content. And you know, other countries benefit from that.
Just on that point as well, it's probably worthwhile Andy just chimes in here, because Hela Chain has done a really interesting, it's got a really interesting partner with A-Star, which is the Singapore government research and development arm, similar to
the
CSIRO.
right?
Yeah. So maybe you want to talk a bit about their team and what you're doing.
Yeah. So, well, frankly, even in Singapore, there's always a talent crunch. So, we built a layer one, but without the support co-development partner of A-Star, which is, so A-Star is like a research agency funded by the Singapore government. I think Singapore government poured like more than 50 billion into this agency over the years. They currently have like 5,000 engineers, half of them are PhD holders. Yeah, and then around 2.5 years ago, we sat down together actually to come up with an AI project. So I was telling them that, you know, what I really want to do is something, is to use a blockchain to actually secure the AI models, to build that blockchain infrastructure so that we can, you know, I would say, open this opportunity for collaboration between AI developers and creators. So at that point in time, right, actually, A-Star, they haven't done a private blockchain. They only did like some private blockchains for the government agencies before. So yeah, so it's good that they later on assigned like 10 scientists to our project, and then develop this together with us.
So you work with the kind of equivalent of Cyro here in Australia.
Yeah.
On a public blockchain.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was.
And Singapore also announced the layer 1. Is that the one that you're building?
Yeah, they announced it on the papers. Yeah.
Yeah. That is amazing.
Yeah, we were a bit surprised that it went through, because they have never done something like a public blockchain, and
yes,
there's a lot of risk that the government is taking as well.
Yeah. And I probably thank you very much for bringing that. So if someone has further questions to blockchain, Hela Labs, and they will be here for the next panel and during the break. Anything about investment, talk to Ben. Very well, a lot of experience in traditional finance and also in Web3 space, and all regulated and well supported by a good financial advice. With licenses, obviously. It's not a speculation, it's not a YouTube channel. So I'll thank you very much for that. Well, we're kind of running out of time, but some of the points that we raised here will be very relevant to continue in our next panel. A lot of references to education. We have UWA here, Curtin University. We have industry. We'll be talking about smart cities. So some of the concepts we mentioned here will be obviously